start recording this. What's up, Kwa?
What's up, Narcy? How you feeling?
I'm good, bro. How you feeling?
It's the IRAQAFELLA show with special guest Talib Kweli.
Kweli, before we start, I want to give you your flowers. I want to thank you for, all the years of hard work that you put into the culture and to the game and to music and for influencing artists such as myself and many that came after me to use their platform responsibly. Thank you so much.
No, thank you. You are inspiring to me on many levels. You are the type of person who people say should exist, say they wish existed, but actually exist. People are caught up in the flashing lights, and in large pockets of our society worship celebrity. And so people get frustrated with what celebrity culture has to offer them. And hip hop, is so famous in hip hop is such a popular art form, such a popular medium. People, whenever something happens, people be like, why aren't the rappers doing this? Why aren't the rappers saying this? More rappers should do this. More rappers is that's why Chappelle's joke about Ja Rule is funny. Like, well, what is Ja Rule thinking? That's what makes the joke funny. Yeah. Right? But and most of the people I come across don't know who you are, Narcy. Most of the artists that I respect know who you are. Yeah. But most of the people that I come across don't know who you are. But you are doing the work that people say hip-hop artists should do without the accolades, and the work of bringing it into academics, bringing it into, bringing your spirituality into it, bringing it, making it a community in the way in which you do so deliberately. So and writing about it in the way in which you do. So I appreciate it.
I appreciate it, man. I learned that a lot from just watching you guys from afar and seeing which we'll get into, the artistic community that you guys had. And I've always been a solo artist, so I've learned so many parts of the game, and the only one I haven't learned is how to reach more people. So we'll get into that. You're in the hotbed of the world right now. You're in the #1 country with COVID cases, and nothing new to you, but you're in sort of the country that has been responsible for a lot of injustice around the world over the course of the last 30, 40 years. And it seems like it's the end of an era. Like, we don't know yet. We've been sort of all on our toes waiting to find out when it hits 270 for young Skeletor Joe Biden. But, as one of the voices in the community that spoke like loudly and clearly to racists online and in real life before the Trump era and during the Trump era, what do you envision this next phase of America looking like? And do you feel like it's going to be civil unrest or a space for change?
I think it's poetic that it turns out that we are the shithole country. Americans can't go anywhere. You read stuff in art and poetry about how fascism starts, and history will document how when fascism started in a country that's known for being a fascist country, the people were just trying to live their lives and trying to, everything's normal. It's like that meme of the dog saying it's okay with the fire burning behind it. And I grew up in America. I've stayed here my whole life. I'm in my 40s. Never in my life have I seen police presence, almost military-like presence, just because of election results. And so, I was walking around. I'm staying in Soho now, and I was trying to find like a nice place to have a drink and trying to buy some Japanese denim and just trying to, be a regular consumer, right? Because that's what we're supposed to do when it's time to panic. We're supposed to buy stuff, right? Yeah, so I'm just being, I'm just being a consumer, and my movement is restricted because the shops have security, and the shops now have security, and then the cops are in the neighborhood, and even one of the security guards of one of the shops was like, oh shit, this Kweli is like a security guard from the tunnel. And he's like, no, you could go this way. He opened up the barricade and let me go. So I'm still privileged. In society, I'm still good. You know what I'm saying? I could still move around, but it's not lost on me that in order for me just to walk down the street, it's like going into a nightclub. It's not lost on me that I'm now find myself on the daily complimenting people on their mask. One of the craziest things and feelings in the world is to compliment someone on a mask they have to wear because of how our president has mishandled this thing. And you know, I'm someone who feels like we should wear a mask anyway. It's not Donald Trump's fault that we have to wear a mask, but we're in a society where they have effectively made it so that the misinformation or the lack of information is as valuable as actual information from experts. So to answer your question, the America that I knew is over. It's obviously been over for a long time, but now it's like bubbling to the surface and is breaching. When I'm walking around in these streets, it's unfathomable to say that you're the best country in the world and that you're a free country and to be sort of patting yourself on the back when we can't even have a fucking election, part of my language, without a police presence in the street. You got Donald Trump Jr. on Twitter right now literally saying that Trump should go to war. The language he used was total war. When the son of the sitting president is saying that the president should go to total war with the citizens that he's presiding over because he don't like election results. I mean, what do you call that in history?
He's coked out though, so
yeah. Shout out to Aubrey O'Day, that's the homie.
Yeah, I mean, what I also want to know is, like, I've been thinking about this a lot, and I think us slowing down and then seeing you guys for a short period of time and then leaving, and the way that we're all thinking is it's reaching a point in democracy and freedom where it's eating at itself. You know, our father, like my father specifically, grew up under a military regime, a military coup, and then a beginning of a dictatorship. And then when he left there, he came to Canada and immigrated here to give us a better life. And in that, he used to always say to me, and I think I might have mentioned this on People's Party, that I gave you too much freedom. And I've been thinking about that a lot. Like, that's how I feel about everybody around me. It's not a community-driven society that we live in anymore in North America, when democracy and capitalism are at the point where we're living for as an individualized mass. We're individuals in a mass, not a mass of individuals. So like, everybody thinks for themselves. Everybody's everybody's tweets are more important than the other. Everything is like, go, go, go. Do you think that breaking point where our rights are now not touching each other, but folding over each other, is going to create a bigger problem for us in North America than already exists right now?
Yeah, I've been thinking about that a lot. I've been thinking about the fact that one of the main defenses of people who are pro-Trump online, or even people in people I know in real life, people who are pro-Trump, is that I don't like Biden's tax plan. Trump's, Biden's tax plan is like, if you make enough money for you to be concerned about Biden's tax plan affecting your pockets, then you need to lend me some money. You know what I'm saying? Like, either you're filthy rich and you're crying about nothing, or you're a bootlicker for the filthy rich. And it's just been so commonplace to defend voting against your own interests or having Stockholm syndrome in the name of your own interest. I've never seen anything like it.
Yeah, it's great. It's crazy. It's it just feels like it doesn't feel like a movie. It just feels like karma. Like, we're at a point where we've exhausted the world, and now the world is going to exhaust us, or we're going to just exhaust ourselves. It's like the demons like the chickens coming home to roost, like how Malcolm said, ages ago.
Yeah.
You've been staunchly pro-community, no justice, no peace. You've been pro-Black. You've been, you've always put this at the forefront of everything that you do, even if it's just you having fun or creating content with friends or whatever. It's, what are moments like these? Do they galvanize you to want to work harder, or are there moments that have like broken you down and made you question everything that you do?
Well, I'll be completely honest with you. You know a little bit about some of the drama that I went through, social media drama I went through this summer. Yeah. Stuff like that. When it's strangers online, I don't care. But when sometimes the things that are said about me online or other people like me online, are not vetted properly by the people who claim they're supposed to be supporting me, that is disheartening. And it makes me, some of that stuff, to be honest with you, brother, made me feel like, am I giving too much of myself to this? Like, am I not engaging in enough self-care? There were people who are in my life who I felt like should have had my back and did not. And I had to like really put my ego to the side and be like, I'm here to do this work, not as a personal reward, but I'm here to do this work because I have to do this work. So I was tested in that way this summer. And I'm glad I was tested in that way, because you can get too comfortable. Beyond that, on a more macro level, in 2016, I was touring the world. I was doing 200 shows a year. And so what that means, it's a great privilege to be able to tour the world and do that many shows. But what that means is that I'm performing in front of and in rooms with, all the time, most of my time, people who agree with me, people who leave their houses and pay money that they worked hard to earn to come spend time with me and listen to what I got to say. And for the large part of, mostly agree with me. That's an incredible privilege that I do not take for granted, because it's my job. It's what I do for a living. And what most people do for a living is commute to work. And on that commute, they might have to be on public transportation with people who don't agree with them, people who want to see them dead. They might have to go to work and be in a cubicle next to someone who is diametrically opposed to them. And in order to put food on the table for their family, they just got to suck it up. They just got to deal with it. And what I learned in 2016 is people who deal with that have a different perspective that I need to value more. You met my friend Seth Bird out, in Brooklyn and in Yellow Springs, and Seth is a plumber. And I was like, Seth was like, Trump's gonna win. I was like, Trump's gonna win? There's no way. I was an optimist. I had more faith in the American people. And I just, from my vantage point, my perspective in 2016, I did not see how Trump could possibly win. Mm-hmm. And then, he didn't win the popular vote. He won the Electoral College. But that made me rethink how I approached politics and how I approached activism. And I went harder after that. You saw me go harder after that. Like I showed up in DC to protest Trump for a week, because I felt like, wow, I'm so removed from what everyday people are dealing with. I didn't see this coming. And I'm someone who had prided myself on being able to call presidential elections. I always called them correctly my whole life. You know what I'm saying?
So throw a bet down.
Yeah, I did. Narcy, I threw a bet down. I bet a stranger on the internet $3,000 Trump was gonna lose. And the election day, he was like, "Yo, what's up with my bread, bro?" And I paid that man, Narcy. Paid that man. And to his credit, he's like, "Okay, I'm gonna stop trolling you because you actually paid me." But I'm out $3K because of that bet. And I'm not even a gambling man, Narcy. I don't play craps. I don't play blackjack. I don't go to Vegas. I don't gamble. It's not something I do.
Gambling on politics is different. I forgive you for that one. I would do it.
That's how strongly I felt. I was like, this is easy money. And it wasn't even easy money, because I was like, if I win, you just have to stop trolling me. If you win, I'm giving you $3,000.
And you can keep trolling me?
Right. You know what I'm saying?
I was playing that mood track at the top because when I moved back to Canada in 2000, obviously, I had the Blackstar record. I had a lot of the records that came out right before that. And the Native Tongues movement was very formative in my voice when I started creating music. But I first heard you on a CD, a double CD that my sister brought me when I was still living in the UAE, and she was here studying. She's a couple of years older than me. So she would come back and bring me loads of CDs. And one of them was this orange CD that I got, the Sound Bombing Volume 1. And the Lyricist Lounge CD at the same time. So I got both of those in the same trip when she came. And I remember reading the liner notes and feeling like, wow, this is like finally, because I was writing at a very young age. So I was like, this is finally like what I've been looking for, and I can't find it around me. So I really dove into those CDs. The sound, the aesthetic, the lyrics, the messaging, though it was like a completely different life to mine, it was a window into knowledge of self, which I've told you this before. A big part of the reason this class is written the way that it's written when I teach it in physical form is the Blackstar album. Knowledge of Self is really all I try to leave my students with. It's not really about learning anything else. Can you tell me a bit about the era of, 1994 to 1997 in New York, when you got your first stripes as an MC and got on your first records that came out on a label?
Well, that warms my heart because the people that I made music with in that time are, my family. And that is where I developed as an MC. You talk about my stomping grounds. When you talk about experiencing that as an outsider, it feels like, wow. It's like we didn't understand how special what it is we were doing. 95, I left New York to go travel. I took a Greyhound bus to LA to go to the Good Life Cafe and ended up in the Bay Area, like Hobo Junction and them. But it was like a stew. I feel like every artist needs a community that's a stew to bounce ideas off of with other artists. It's like Wordsworth, Punchline, A.L. Skills, La Quantum Leap, Supernatural. These people made me better. And I'm not the same MC without them. Danny and Anthony from the Lyricist Lounge, I used to want to perform at the Lyricist Lounge in 92, 93, and they'd be like, no, you're not good enough. And I used to be like, man, later for them dudes. But they really, Danny Castro and Anthony Marshall, they my age, but they were gatekeepers. They figured out they were hustlers. They understood that the scene was bubbling up, and they was like, we could take what's going on outside in these ciphers and bring it inside. And Danny's still like that with me. I just DJ Tony Touch party 2 weeks ago, which Danny's a promoter on, and he stopped the party, grabbed the mic like, yo, Kweli, you got mad better with the DJing, son. I didn't have faith in you at first. So you guys have always been creatively just challenging me in the most honest way. And when it comes to sound bombing, it was just Raucus trying to capitalize on the mixtape thing that was happening in the streets of New York. Mixtapes were determining factors of the culture. So Raucus was trying to get in on that. But I didn't realize making sound bombing and sound bombing 2, how people would tap into that. People tell me all the time that sound bombing was their introduction into a whole world. And I'm just happy to be a part of it.
Yeah, it was. I mean, at this point, you were surrounded by like the sharpest pens in hip hop in general to this day. Like, you, Pharaoh, Black Dot, Yassine, these guys all became lexicons and like tableaus that, they're like painters. You guys are like, you've created this voice that's very distinct. Like when you see a painting by a Picasso or whatever, that's them. When I hear a Kweli verse, even if I read it, I can almost know that this is you because you really put your heart into it. And you were saying that at the beginning of this, you weren't aware of the impact of what you guys were doing. But as you progressed into, the mid 90s and almost the late 90s, were you aware of this like legendary status that you guys were going to develop? Was there an aha moment where you were like, yo, we are incredible legends,
I have one moment in particular, like in the early days, like when Blackstar first dropped and me and Mos were like becoming like underground hip hop media darlings. And Mos reminds me of this all the time when we're sitting at some nightclub. This is a long time ago when Mos Def used to sit in
nightclubs. He has no place to sit anymore.
Yeah, no, we used to sit in nightclubs behind Bella Ropes, drinking champagne, stuff like that.
Amazing.
Yeah, that's not what Yassine Bey does with his time anymore. But he turned to me, he goes, Kweli, we're rap stars. I remember him saying that, and it's like it was a dream of ours to become rap stars. But for me, doing the Great Day in Harlem picture, where Gordon Parks revisits his Great Day in Jazz picture with all the hip hop artists, and I remember like being in that picture, being asked to be a part of that picture, walking down the street in in like Santa Monica, California, and Rakim pulling up in like a van, like, yo, Talib Kweli, what's up? Hop in the car. That's how I met Rakim. The block party, Dave Chappelle block party.
Mm-hmm.
And the Fugees came back, and what Dave Chappelle was able to do with that movie, and how everybody was able to eat off of that, and what that movie meant to the culture. Those are some of those moments.
what was the energy of this? Actually, we'll get into that after. I think I want to ask you about Blackstar. You know, there was something so organic and present about that first album, and it's a seminal record in hip hop culture now. You know, it might not have sold more than other records, but anybody that you ask in hip hop about this album, it had an effect on them. And I think it was because you guys documented a field that was in New York that was about spirituality, again, knowledge of self, determining who you are, and using spaces like nobody else did in the game, you know? And Yasin is a gem of a person. He's an incredible artist and someone who's also very hard to get in touch with, and a bit of a ghost, you know, like he's in and out. If you're in touch with him, you're kind of a chosen one. And that's how I've always felt about my friendship and my brotherhood with Yasin. Can you give us a bit of insight into the making of the first Blackstar album and the process? Was it difficult? Was it very smooth? And how did it translate into this beautiful body of work?
Well, I was still getting to know Yasin when we made the album. We become friends and brothers over the years. Become my partner in rhyme. One of my best friends, one of my brothers, one of my OGs, one of my mentors. But when the Blackstar album first started, I was just a fan of Mos Def. I was someone who I had met Mos Def. We had people in common. Mr. Man from the Bush Babies is somebody who you're both friends with. But I was stunned by him. I was stunned by his ability to take high-minded concepts and break them down in very simple lyrical patterns. And my style was more wordy and loquacious. And so that's something that I appreciated about his style. And we were having children at the same time. And so he's very much in the family. And he was excited he used to come visit the bookstore every once in a while that I was working at. And he invited me over for dinner. So it's like, imagine just an MC that you've seen on TV, you know, and he wasn't just an MC, he was an actor too. So I would see him in little commercials, see him in little sitcoms, see his records with UTDs. And he's invited me over his house for dinner. And I'm like, wow, it's like, I'm doing this. And I would go over his house and I would leave little demo tapes at his house. And I'd like, you know, he was more about breaking bread and I was trying to like listen to my demo. And after months of these dinners, one day he called me, he's like, yo, I listened to this tape that you had, Reflection Eternal, or it was called Eternal Reflection back then. It's the Eternal Reflection tape. He was like, yo, this is really good. And I'm like, okay, can you do a song with me? He said, cool. So I had this song I was working on, Fortify Live, that Mr. Man from the Bush Babies had already agreed to be on it. So I figured I'm going to put the song on, I'm going to put Mos Def on the song Mr. Man because they had a single out with Bush Babies, Love Song at the time. And I figured he would say yes quicker if he knew that Mr. Man was on it. So we got on this record. I had met the guys from Raucus through John Forte years before, but Mos Def was doing a single deal with Raucus. And so I was like, okay, well maybe now that I have a song with Mos Def, I'll do a single deal with Raucus. And I asked him for a single deal. We put out Fortify Live and started bubbling in Fat Beats. And then I was like, became known to the Fat Beats Raucus crowd. That's the kid who got the song with Mos Def. You know, that's the kid who got the song with Raucus. And we started doing little shows around the city. And whenever Mos Def had a show, I would show up and perform Fortify Live with him. And whenever I had a show, Mos Def would show up and perform Fortify Live with me. So people started expecting us to show up together. And it started becoming a thing like Mos Def and Talib Kweli are going to be here. Before we even came up with the name Blackstar. Mos came up with that name. He said we should do like a little thing called Blackstar. Raucus was trying to, by this time, I had signed a Reflection Eternal deal with Raucus, and Mos had signed a Mos Def deal with Raucus. And Raucus, at the same time, Mos was like, we should call ourselves Blackstar. Mos was like, we should put out a record with you two collaborating before we drop the Mos Def solo record, or before you drop Reflection Eternal, to sort of give the audience a small taste of what's to come. And that Blackstar record, you know, they gave me $30,000, which ballooned to like $70,000. And I essentially would use that money on taking cabs to Mos Def's house, waiting for him downstairs in the cab, picking him up, taking him to the
That's where your budget got run up, waiting for him.
Oh, yeah. Like most of the budget for Blackstar was spent on like cabs. You know what I'm saying? It's like, I got with High Tech, got with Sean J. Period. I paid Funky Slice Studio. I paid I administered that entire project myself, and I had never done anything like that before. But what else was going on in my life at 21 years old? It's like, here's an opportunity to put out a rap record with Mos Def. I threw myself into it.
Yeah. There's a line from that record that really, really shaped my approach to the way I create art. And it's, give me the fortune, keep the fame, said my man Lewis. I agree, know what he mean, because we live the truest lie. And that's like a forever bar for me, Okay. Can you flesh that out for me and tell me what it's inspired by? I don't think I've ever heard you explain where that comes from. Who's Lewis? And I'm part of my ignorance.
Shout out to my man Lewis. Lewis is just a dude that I grew up with. He's just a homie. He's just, Lewis is the homie. The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison had a huge impact on me. And the chorus for that record is an interpolation of the last paragraph of The Bluest Eye by Toni Morrison. Not strong, only aggressive, not free, only licensed, not compassionate, we were only polite. That's the beginning sentence of that paragraph. And that paragraph hit me like a ton of bricks, because it was like, this is the most accurate description of our society that I've ever seen. And so I went into that record dedicated to the idea that the hook was going to be based on Toni Morrison's Bluest Eye. So I'm like, I got to rhyme about Bluest Eye. What rhymes with Bluest Eye? Truest lie.
Yeah.
Well, what rhymes with Truest lie? Lewis Eye. Lewis didn't do that to me. I started backwards. I wanted to rhyme with Bluest Eye. Then there's like Lewis Eye. And I was like, I have to figure out a way that Lewis Eye rhymes with, so I have to just add that into the story.
Oh my God. I thought his name was Lewis I, like his last name started with an I.
Give me the fortune, keep the fame, said my man Lewis. I agree.
Know what I mean?
Get it now. I'm clueless why. Like, that's what it was. It was just me trying to find a bar. But I mean, Lewis, and I was hanging out with Lewis. We had a bunch of conversations, and I'm sure he agreed that keep the fortune, keep the fame. I'm sure that's a sentiment that he agrees with, so I don't think he's too pressed about whether he actually said that.
That's amazing. Reflection Eternal was another amazing, the first Reflection Eternal was something amazing. And it was so good because I guess High Tech is such a architect of sound. He's able to create a world with the MC that he's working with. And it's also a very important record for people who love words and beats, How did you meet High Tech and build such a legendary catalog with him? How is this creative process differently treated to the Blackstar process?
Well, High Tech is, at least for the first Blackstar album, High Tech is largely the architect of the sound. He did most of the production on it. And it's because of how infatuated myself and Yasin Bey were with High Tech beats at that time. In 94, 95, in 93, I was going to New York University. And my roommate was a man named Damon Smith, who started calling himself Divine, because he's from Cincinnati, Ohio. He went to high school with High Tech, but I didn't meet High Tech through him per se. He started calling himself Divine because, of course, when he came to New York, he became a 5%er. And he brought another friend of his, this kid named Omari, who I actually ended up arguing and fighting with a lot years later in life. But before we got to a bunch of arguments and fights, Omari was the guy who came from Cincinnati, who was like infatuated with all things New York. And, after I dropped out of college, I was in New York in a funk. In 94, I was in a funk. Because my parents are educators. And I was just working at it. I was working at Akiru Books. And I just didn't like how I had a baby on the way. I didn't like how my life was going. I felt like I was failing at life. And I felt like New York was just too overwhelming to me. And Omari, Divine's friend, was like, come out to Ohio and hang out in Ohio. I'm working with a group called Mood. They really dope. Come out here. And I was like, okay. I took a Greyhound bus because I wasn't shy about hopping on that Greyhound. That was one thing about me that I feel like is really important to my story. I left New York often and would go, and I feel like that gave me an advantage. The fact that I was quick to hop on a Greyhound or a Peter Pan and go somewhere. And so I went to stay with this kid, Omari, and I met Mood and I met High Tech. And I was thoroughly impressed with what they were doing because they were hustlers. In New York, I was in an artistic community and everybody was broke. Everybody's broke. We hop in the train, we eating, nonsense, cheap food from the bodegas. Like we're literally starving artists. And these mood dudes, they were hustling. You know what I'm saying? Like they was not broke. They had Pathfinders, they had studio equipment. They came from the struggle that I came from, but my artistic community in New York wasn't a hustler community. And so even though I knew hustlers, but the hustlers in New York wasn't rappers at that time. Now they are, but they wasn't at that time. Yeah. And so I was just impressed with the sort of autonomy, and the independence that Mood was able to create. And High Tech was working with a dude named Vicious Lee. And Vicious Lee was a hustler rapper. He rapped about drug dealing. But Vicious Lee went to jail. And then High Tech was left with all these beats. And I was like, yo, man, give me them beats. And High Tech started sending me beats, and I created a demo. And it ties back into the Lyricist Lounge story, because Lyricist Lounge be like, nah, Kweli, you got to step your game up. But when I played them the first demo I made with High Tech, I'll never forget it. They were like, oh, you can perform that. We like these songs. So it's me rhyming over the High Tech beats that allowed people to really see my vision.
And if I'm not mistaken, after these albums and, you began touring and Rawkus blew up and got a major label distribution, and then you got your own deal as well. From an outsider looking in after the death of Biggie and Pac, there was a big moment of separation, almost like everybody needed to grieve in their own way. And then you started seeing these two mislabeled sections of hip hop being, the conscious and the jiggy, started merging a bit more. There was an acknowledgement of each other, and that's what sort of pushed Afrocentrism to the forefront of the hip hop scene in the later 90s, especially when Wu-Tang Forever came out, and the 5 Percenters became more like, I started connecting more to the Islam and the 5 Percenter and the knowledge of self because of this merger of worlds. And then there was a crazy magic happening in New York at Electric Lady Studios, something that's like a folklore, right? We all hear about it, Mama's Gun, Black on Both Sides, Firstborn Second, like Water for Chocolate, your album, Electric Circus. It was like a breeding ground, and quality came out of there. And when you listen to
the quality didn't come out of there, but the Train of Thought came out of that vibe. Quality came out of a different set of vibes, but yes.
Okay. But when you went into your first solo album, Quality, after you put out Train of Thought, and you collaborated with people like Kanye and Dilla and DJ Quick, and your sound changed and grew. What was the difference now when you were back in charge of a solo record versus working directly with one producer the whole time?
Well, it's interesting that you say, you talk about the climate in New York. When the Blackstar's first single, Definition, was sort of like a tribute to Big and Tupac and their deaths and how it affected us personally. I don't know if you know this, but I used to work for Puff.
I didn't know that. Tell me.
So when I was in boarding school, I was coming back and forth before I left for boarding school, I was working for a company called Stress Entertainment, which was run by Jessica Rosenblum, #1 party promoter in New York at the time. She still does parties. She used to manage John Forte. Myself, my man Rubik's, my man Juju, John Forte, we used to work for Jessica. So when you hear about the tunnel, I was in the tunnel putting up the posters before Flex would DJ. Jessica was managing Funkmaster Flex, DJ Enough, Big Cap, Mad Wayne, Biz Markie. So these are the hottest DJs, rest in peace to Big Cap, in New York at the time. We were carrying the crates, handing out flyers, putting up the posters. I was intimately involved in that scene. And Jessica's partner was Puff. So I was at the Tunnel and Sound Factory and Red Zone and all these parties. And Flex, when I go to see Flex,
post Biggie or pre?
This is during Biggie. Like I smoked blunts with Biggie and Tupac together.
Wow.
At the country club.
Wow.
You know what I'm saying? Like I was a young buck. I remember sitting out in the country club, and it's Biggie, Tupac, C Knowledge from Diggable Planets, and John Forte Sarah Jones, the writer, and a bunch of other people, and they're sitting in the VIP section, and I'm right outside the rope because I didn't have the props to get in the VIP section yet. And like Forte is making sure that I get to hit the blunt that they're all smoking together.
Wow.
You know what I'm saying? But yeah, you know, so my connection with Funkmaster Flex is deep.
Yeah.
Like when he sees me, it's a deep. When I see Diddy, it's a deep. I know Diddy on a different level than a lot of people notice. So I never looked at that. That was what's interesting about the Roycus era. During that era, it was like everybody's like, "Fuck Diddy," and we don't, and Jay-Z, we're not down with that. And this is a world that I was fully immersed in. So it's like, yeah, you know, I'm rapping on this underground thing, but these people that y'all are looking at as the enemy, I know these people personally, and I've worked with them. And so it was always interesting to me to be able to see both sides of that. When I stopped being about going to the nightclubs and partying and being in the scene, when I stopped doing that and started focusing on my craft, I went from hanging out with Diddy and them to hanging out with Supernatural all the time. And that's when my craft, that's when it started working for me. You know, it started when I stopped paying attention to the flashing lights and started paying attention to the craft. That's when it blew up. Now you talked about quality though.
Yeah, I was talking about a electric. Sorry, we kind of sidetracked.
Yeah.
We can go everywhere, but I'm talking about Electric Lady and the energy of that studio and all the records that came out of it, and then leaving that, and you know, everybody kind of doing the solo thing, and you working.
Yeah. That's a great question. The curse of being around so many visionary artists is that everyone's a visionary. And so everyone's vision for their art is so strong. It's so strong that we're all in Electric Lady together. We're there because the resources are there. You know, you can go to all the resources that we could have wanted was right there. But then we come out and everyone has a modicum of success. And so budget gets bigger, and Erica starts touring, and the Roots, you know, they start, and I'm now people recognize me in the street. Now DJ Quick knows who I am. You know, now I could call DJ Scratch and he'll give me a beat. That wasn't a thing. It's like when the Beatles come out, and they're a garage band essentially, and it's just the four of them, one for all for one. And then they come out and they become the biggest band in the world. Well, now we can get Phil Spector, and now we can get the Wall of Sound. And so you go out and you hire Phil Spector. You hire, you know, you start to, as an artist, why shouldn't you take advantage of every resource that you earned from being good at your craft? But then what happens with a group like the Beatles, they start to realize, well, we lost our original vision. Now we have to strip it back. We have to remove layers. Well, now let's go to India and like listen to those sounds and try to tap into our spiritual center. And every artist that achieves any success goes through that. I went through that. And I'm proud of the music I made with people who people said I shouldn't make music with. I'm proud of the music I made with Gucci Mane and Pharrell and DJ Quick. But I did get to a point in my career, later on in my career, you're involved in this, which is why I started calling you to direct stuff for me and stuff. I got to my point in my career. I'm like, okay, I did all that. I experimented with all that. I tried the different sounds. I tried to work with all my people I want to work with. But what am I good at? And what is my vision? And I had to strip some of that away. And that's where a record like Gutter Rainbows or Radio Silence comes from. Well, Radio Silence was not really Radio Silence, because that was me trying to experiment more, but like more like Gutter Rainbows and Gravitas. Those are records where I'm like, well, no, let me try to get back to what it is that people say that they want from me. Let me try to get, like, as an artist, I have to experiment or else I'm going to die. I have to try new things, but also let me give myself and the fans what it is I'm good at.
About a year into, or really like the first single that came off your record, Get By, became your biggest song, you know, to date. Not that you don't have big songs, but that song is really an iconic part of your catalog, and it got the attention of everybody, and everybody started knowing who Kweli was. When that happened, are you the kind of artist that feels the pressure of the public, and what did that fame and attention, and I have a follow-up question to this, but what did that attention do to you creatively, knowing that, like, okay, now I've set a new standard for myself, how do I achieve that or go above that?
I think that's a great question, because you can't go above that. Like, you can't, like, it is what it is. you have to learn how to not try to recreate those moments. The fan is not the boss. The fan will say, give me that over again. And if you start to listen to the fan as if the fan is the boss and try to give the fan what the fan is asking for, you're shooting yourself in the foot. As an artist, we have to be leaders. We have to tell the fans, it's not about what you want. It's about what's inside of me. You have a choice. You can either accept it or you can go back and listen to Get By. You know, those are valid choices you have.
And it's rare. Not a lot of the artists, you know, a lot of MCs around you may have had one or two of those, but that one really catapulted you and put you in the conversation of greatest MC of all, one of the greatest MCs of all time, to the point where you guys had that remix with Jay and Snoop and Kanye and Mos and Busta. And, you know, what did you start thinking about? Did that make you start thinking about legacy? Like, you know, what do I want to be known for? Because this song is a very specific message, and people were boxing you in before all this, being a conscious artist. And it's really, you and Ye really created something that's a merger between those two worlds. You know, did you start thinking about, yeah, sorry, go ahead.
You know, no, yeah. My experience with that is that in terms of legacy, what I saw in that moment was it no longer belongs to you. The guy who created Pepe the Frog is like a social justice, progressive-minded artist. But the alt-right, these neo-Nazis, they took over Pepe the Frog and they decided that it's our mascot. And that guy, you know, I can't imagine, I'm not a cartoonist. I have respect for cartoonists and artists. I can't imagine creating like a frog cartoon that you love so much that you don't want to let go. You know what I'm saying? But he's an artist. It's his goddamn frog cartoon. And so he was very, I remember when the alt-right was using Pepe the Frog to stalk people and troll people, and the creator was like, no, you guys don't understand. That's not what Pepe the Frog is for. They tried to do these series of Pepe the Frog to try to change the narrative of what was happening. And it was too late. It no longer belonged to him. It was a piece of art that he put out in the world that he has no more control of. When you're working on it, you control it, but once you put it out in the world, it doesn't belong to you anymore. And so he conceded. I remember he was like, he did a whole cartoon with Pepe the Frog is dead, right? And he conceded. He gave it up. My experience with Get By is not that. I am proud of how I no longer own it. I'll never say because the people took it over, but when you listen to that remix, and that the remix comes in different forms, right? There's one main version with everybody's verse, but essentially the remix was, the goal of the remix was me and Jay-Z on the remix, just me and Hov on the remix. That's like a rapper's dream, right? So I got Jay-Z to be on the remix. Busta heard about me he called me. It's like, I gotta be on it. And I remember thinking, that's not what the plan was, but how can I say no to Busta? It's Busta Rhymes.
Yeah.
Okay, so Busta, send me your verse. I played it for Kanye and Mos Def in Platinum Island Studios, which is where I was working out of the time. If you listen to that remix, Jay-Z's verse is 16 bars. Mos's verse is like 32 bars. Busta's verse is 16 bars. Kanye's verse is like 32 bars. My verse is 8 bars. And the reason my verse is 8 bars is because when I played it for Kanye and Mos in the studio, it was the rough version. I wanted to lay 8 bars, think it over, and come back and write my second 8 bars, because this was going to be a history-making record. I wanted my bars to be right. Kanye took the unfinished version to DJ Enough and played it on DJ Enough. And so the version that floated around the internet is the unfinished version that Kanye took to DJ Enough. I never got a chance to finish writing my verse. Wow. And so the record was taken over by the rappers in the industry right in front of my face. It's like, oh, it belongs to us now. And I had to just concede. And to be honest with you, it's just a beautiful feeling that I gave the world, with Kanye's help, something that people felt like we have to be a part of. I mean, 50 Cent was hot as shit. Think about how hot 50 Cent was at that time. And he rapped on it to diss Ja Rule. You know what I'm saying?
That's amazing.
Yeah, and 50, this is where I remember our 50's verse on it. 50 was so hot that he was touring at the time, and he was doing like 2-3 shows a night. If you listen to 50's verse on the Get By remix that he did on a mixtape with Who Kid, his voice is so hoarse that you can barely recognize it as 50. But even though with the hoarse voice, he had to jump on it.
That's crazy. Another question I want to ask you about Jay is when he name checked you or called you out in a verse in a positive way, when he says, if skill, soul, truth be told, up I be, lyrically Talib Kweli. That is another like huge moment for a New York MC. What I know about you is you're a legendary artist. You're a very recognized writer, but also you're a big fan. You love this shit. And I saw you talking to Diamond D in the last interview that you put out with him on People's Party and talking about that like love for the music, and you never lose that no matter how old or how deep in the game you get. How did that moment feel when Jay-Z name checked you? Where were you when you first heard it?
It felt right. I was in the studio. Busta Rhymes, again, involved in the story. He called me. Busta called me. Busta heard the Jay-Z album maybe about 2 weeks before it came out. And he called me and he played me the song over the phone. And I was in Right Track Studios. I was working on Beautiful Struggle. I think I was specifically working on, and I don't remember which song, but I remember after hearing it is when I started writing the verse to Ghetto Show off of Beautiful Struggle featuring Common, where I mentioned the Jay-Z lyric in that song. Is because I had just heard it.
That's crazy.
Yeah.
I want to leave music for a bit and talk about the idea of the Beautiful Struggle, not the album, but really the existence in the struggle. As an artist, one of the qualities that always resonated with me is your drive for humanity and justice. Some of your most viral moments are because you were standing up for these things. And I don't like to call it simply activism. It's beyond the act. It's an intention, a decision you make. And that's a decision I've made. It's a decision Yassine has made. Many of the artists that are around us have made. At what age and what experience in your life would you say you got this intention from?
Man, I mean, I come from people who are Black cultural nationalists. My parents were, at least on the surface, involved in anti-apartheid work, in the 80s. My mother was a member, a bunch of, pro-voting coalition, civil rights activism, stuff like that. I had African art and civil rights art on the walls growing up. So the first is with my parents. Then is hip hop. The hip hop, when I came of age as a teenager, was very pro-Black and pro-conscious. The popular hip hop was. I grew up on KRS and Rakim and Chuck D and Native Tongues and early Ice Cube and X-Clan and Poor Righteous Teachers. And back in the days, in order to be a dope rapper, you had to be conscious. And back in the days, if you had a hip hop album, you had to have a conscious song on your album, or else nobody would take you seriously. So that's the era of hip hop that influenced me, and it was a perfect storm with the Black cultural nationalism I got in the house. As far as actual activism, the first, protest, stuff like that, I remember cutting school in a freshman in high school because we all believed Tawana Brawley. I've changed on that a little bit, but Al Sharpton was a huge figure in the community, and he was standing up for Tawana Brawley. Yusuf Hawkins happened before Tawana Brawley, but I was kind of young. Like, Yusuf Hawkins was definitely a problem that helped make me more aware of the fact that I'm seen as a threat by people that I live in close to. Those Italians and the police and all that. To protest on behalf of Tawana Brawley, and Black Watch involved and started this group called Black Watch. The Tawana Brawley story is shaky, but the first thing that I protested on that I still feel the same about, then I got left back and I got skipped. So this is essentially my freshman year. That was technically my sophomore year and boarding school. This was the year of the invasion of Kuwait and then America invading Iraq. I protested with a small group of students and a teacher, Chip Boyd from my high school. Like maybe 5 of us went to like Hartford, Connecticut to some state building, and we protested the American invasion of Iraq. And that soured me on protest. I think you and me spoke about this.
Mm-hmm.
That soured me on protest because it didn't seem effective.
Same as me.
And at that point, I was like really I used to romanticize the 60s. There's a Kiefer Sutherland movie called 1969 that I used to watch back in the days. I really liked that movie. And it was like, oh, why can't it be like the 60s? You know what I'm saying? I was like, and not until the sort of Occupy Wall Street, the Green Revolution that happened in Egypt, stuff like that, that started the young people who started those movements. I was like, oh, this protest can work.
Mm. I mean, you end up finding out that these Arab Spring moments were also doctored, and you know, hidden hands always get involved in democratic rights that we exercise. And I think why we probably both got disillusioned by protesting is because in North America, the difference between a dictatorship and a democracy really is that you get to exercise a right or you get to speak and say what you want. But the commonality between the two is that it doesn't really make a difference in the long run. They've learned how to commodify and dull these movements. And now that, you know, you're 30 years, 25 years, 30 years into your career, and, you know, you've been to Ferguson, you've seen the Black Lives Matter come together, Black Lives Matter movement come together. You've seen, you know, you guys did the Hip Hop for Respect record very early for Amadou Diallo. You know, what do you see our role as artists be moving forward? Like, what can we do different, especially now that we've had this time to pause and reflect? What can we do differently than what we did before?
As specific to artists?
Yeah, specific to like our, you know, at the end of the day, we're musicians or artists, and yeah, we can say things on platforms and affect people, but our music is the most effective, or our whatever we put out content wise.
Yeah, I think it's our job to point the focus and the spotlight to the actual activists that do the work in between the elections, to the people who don't have the spotlight, to the people like you, Narcy, to the people who don't have the spotlight on them. I'm not going to tell you this. I'm going to tell you a story of. I'm not going to name the artist I was working with. I was working with a prominent hip hop artist who was incensed at what happened with George Floyd and what happened with Breonna Taylor. And this is an artist that's very conscious, very aware, but he's not someone who often speaks publicly, right? And he was like, I want to create this Black agenda that we all can get on board with. And there were very sensitive conversations I had with this artist, because I'm like, look, I come from the movement space, and us as artists, we can't just be out there being like, yo, listen to us because we're famous. You know what I'm saying? So it was a lot of conversation I had with this artist about, no, let's bring this person in. Let's get with this activist group. Let's talk to these people. Well, what you just said, I know someone who's done the research on that. Let's involve them on this. And there was a lot of behind the scenes conversations that were had. And I participated in a lot of like conversations with influencers and politicians behind this. And then, with all due respect to the OG Ice Cube, I saw him roll out his contract with Black America.
Yeah.
And the intention of what he was doing, intention-wise, was very, very, very similar to these private conversations I was having with this other artist. I'm like, oh, okay, we on the same page. But the difference is that I saw Ice Cube roll his thing out in a way where it's like, this is what Ice Cube is saying we should do. And I felt like that was a hindrance to doing. Because two things happened very quickly. ADOS, which is an anti-immigrant, pro-GOP movement, quickly sunk their teeth in Ice Cube. Because a lot of what they purport to be about, Black nationalism, do for self, that overlap with a lot of Ice Cube's points. So without him having the benefit of someone to tap him on the shoulder and be like, nah, not them, bro. He started retweeting them and posting things that they started being involved with them and aligning with them. And then also, he very quickly got weaponized by the Trump administration. Eric Trump sent out a tweet saying that he supports their platinum plan. By the way, the platinum plan, just in name, is one of the most common
Horrible.
things
Yeah,
I've ever heard in my life.
yeah.
But Ice Cube, because he's the OG, and because he's a stand-up dude, he's a highly intelligent individual. He was, he wrote "Nigga Please" with Eric. Like he's Ice Cube is not a trumper at all, but he was made to look like one because his passion for the people, his love for the people, made him create something that on the surface looks like it's a good thing, but in the way in which he rolled it out, he didn't take my opinion, in my humble opinion, because I have a lot of love and respect for this man. He didn't take the full context of what the landscape was. And it's because he's isolated, he's not really in touch with the activists who could serve him.
But you're surrounded by people who, I was sitting with Dave when we were in Yellow Springs, and he was saying, the next thing I want to do is I want to go to Palestine, and he's in a position of power that many of us obviously aren't in, and is aware of that power. And I think that's one thing that people might lack, is that they don't separate celebrity from social power. And when you're aware of that is when you make your intentions and your right decisions clearly. And I think someone like Kanye is another person that suffers from that. He's not aware of his social power. He's only aware of his celebrity.
Right. And the saddest part about it is that his celebrity is not, and with all due respect to his wife, because I have a lot of respect for Kim Kardashian, and who she is trying to be in the public eye. But with all due respect to his wife, she became famous for being a celebrity. He became famous for being an artist. And I think that's where he's not focused on. It's like, dude, you are not a celebrity to us. You're an artist to us.
Yeah, exactly. I have a couple more questions before I open it up to the class. I don't want to take too much of your time, but
it's all good. I appreciate this.
I remember when I visited you in New York the first time, and Donna opened the door for me. You had just come back from tour, and I remember you had a show at Brooklyn Bowl the same night, and that was the night I met Chaz, but I had already known Nico. And you pulled up with a merch bag, like a suitcase filled with merch, and it was a moment for me that was like, oh shit, okay, I'm doing the right thing, and I know how much of an illusion there is on the surface, and then how much work there is in the background to do to, number one, be financially stable, to be successful, and to be independent. But I assume your grind now, from knowing your story, comes from watching the guys in Cincinnati, and then you being on a major and seeing what that offered you, having these high moments and low moments, and then going fully independent with Blacksmith and Javoti and getting major distribution, but really being in control of yourself and the artist that you believe in. And this attaches to this question that we've been talking about your intention in your work. What after almost a decade of being a signed artist made you want to go independent? And this is around the era that I met you. And what made you make that decision? It's not an easy decision to make when you have an infrastructure behind you working. And what are the differences between those?
Well, that's the thing. The infrastructure behind me was not working.
Yeah. So independence, what has that done for you?
It was hard. I got to the point where it was like I was on a treadmill, and like I was just getting the same amount of money per show, but there was nothing being invested in me as an artist, because the people in my life, in order for them to make money from me, they didn't have to do any extra work. The labels I was doing business with, the management I was doing business with, I was such a consistent brand that all you had to do was field phone calls. So it was like, every year I'd get in advance, I'd put out a record, we'd go on tour, the label would get their money, Corey would get his money, I'd make my little money, and then we repeat the process. But I wasn't growing as an artist. And I had the foresight to know that that's not going to last forever. I'm like, this touring ain't going to last forever. iTunes ain't going to last forever. If you look at what's happening on the internet, they're not buying the records the way they buying records. So what are we going to do, guys? What are we going to do? And it got to the point where I was like, it's not what are we going to do, it's what are you going to do, Kweli? What am I going to do? And I had to just step it up. And that's the era in which I met you, which I was like, well, I just need to, instead of harassing Corey for wear the t-shirts, I'm gonna print my own t-shirts. I'm gonna call the venues myself. I'm gonna work with artists, and God bless Nico.
Yeah, man.
God bless Chaz.
God bless Nico. He's a big connector in this whole thing.
Yeah, because one thing I love about Nico, and not every artist I work with was like this, but Nico was like this, Corey Moe was like this, Jessica Care Moore was like this. I said to them, look, I'm not a label exec by nature. I'm not a businessman by nature. It makes sense for me to run my own business for my career. But all the artists that you see on Girodi, I didn't solicit any of them. They came to me. They saw how I was operating. I was like, yo, we want to get in on that. And I was honest with them. Look, I can't guarantee you're going to be rich. I can't guarantee you're going to be famous. I can't guarantee you be successful. What I can guarantee is your video will come out. You're going to do some press. You will always, because I tour all the time, you will always have an opening slot on the road with Talib Kweli. You can find it on Spotify. You can find it on Google Play. Everything else is up to you. I'm not good at. I haven't proven that I can blow an artist up. But what I have proven is I can work with like-minded artists to help us all get our music out and support each other.
And what do you think now with the way the world is? You know, both of us lost a lot of income this year because we can't tour. And I think it's a gift and a curse in a way, because we were scrambling, you know, when you're not in a bad way, but we were just running around the world, getting checks, you know, eating good food, smoking, meeting people, getting on a plane, rolling back, doing the same thing. And then you're one of the people that in my life that is doing that maybe 75% of the year, you know? Yeah. And now that you've really slowed down due to it, when it, hopefully, inshallah, when it all comes back, what are you going to change about the way you were functioning? You know, you have an album in the tuck. You have a Blackstar album in the tuck. I'm sure you have a Kweli album in the tuck. So what's the plan?
I'll be honest with you. I feel like that chapter of my life is over.
Wow.
I have no interest in being that guy. When you described me, when you met me, like when I came in the door, like I'm like, who's that guy? Like, you know, I met that guy, I know that guy, but I'm not that guy anymore. I have no interest in putting myself through that, but only because I put myself through that. If without the experience of doing it, that lifestyle is very toxic. I'm the healthiest I've been in 20 years right now because I'm not on the road. And I was already tailoring my life at the beginning of the year. I was already telling myself mentally, I have to stop. I have to stop. I can't keep doing this. It's not fair to my family. It's not fair to my body. I can't keep, and on the road, I was touring Europe in February while Europe was a hot spot for COVID. And I feel like I caught COVID. I went to the doctor. They didn't tell me I had it, but I felt like when I started reading, I felt like I had it. It was the sickest I ever been. I never in my life canceled shows because of a sickness. I canceled like 2 weeks worth of shows. And that, before the pandemic lockdown, when I had to cancel 2 weeks worth of shows because I was sick, I was like, God is telling me to sit the fuck down. Like, how can I ignore this sign? So I was already in February, beginning of March, like, what can I do to not be on the road?
Wow.
And then this happens. The lockdown happens.
That's incredible.
And I'm like, and I was already working on this podcast with Dave Chappelle. Excuse me, not with Dave Chappelle. I was working on this podcast, Luminary, to bring People's Party to Luminary.
Yeah.
Right? And we finished that deal a week before the lockdown happened. So I'm like, what are these signs? And then, you know, I have a newborn, newborn with a woman in Cincinnati. And so now it's like, well, I now have to be in Ohio. And Dave is doing all these shows in lockdown. It's like all these signs started converging. And I just feel like I'm in the right place. And I'm blessed and highly favored that it didn't stop everything I was doing. I'm able to still move it about. But 20 years, 200 plus shows a year, every year.
It's a lot.
I don't know how I did it, Narcy. I don't know how I did it. I look at what I was doing now that I'm not doing it. It was like, what was I thinking? How did I do that?
Yeah, I think after this, what's going to happen for a lot of us is it's going to become a selective experience, which is going to make the music more valuable again. You know, you're now seeing that platforms like Spotify are charging a form of payola for artists to be in the algorithm, and like it's all a part of the same problem that we enter these spaces and build audiences and attempt to grow our the financial gain that comes out of them, and then they twist it on us, and then we have to bow down to it. But like now that you're off Twitter, you know, which is what I'm trying to do, is get off Twitter. I'm not trying to get removed from Twitter, but
well, that it's funny you say that, Narcy, because I was planning to stop touring, and then the pandemic happened. It's like, no, God is like, sit down. You have to stop touring right now. I was planning to get off Twitter, and then God was like, let me help you out.
Well, there you go. I think we just have to be more community driven and really hold each other down in a different way. And this will be my last question from me. The last experience, every experience that I've had with you, and I've told you this, if it wasn't for you, I wouldn't have met Dave. If it wasn't, you know, and although I know Mo, and Mo introduced me to Dave Chappelle, you were a big connector for me in that trip that I went to New York to shoot the Traveling Light video for you. And there's a sense of, and I said it on stage in Yellow Springs, I said, you know, that Dave is not a comedian, he's a magician. And because he's able to pull and bring people into the space with the power that he's aware of from all these different parts of his life, no matter how famous you are, how known you are, how accomplished you are, and he puts them all in the same space. And I think that is a great example of what our responsibility is going to be in the next phase of all our careers. My experience in Yellow Springs with you guys was the only experience I had this year besides going to New York and being at the hotel that you're in right now.
Are you recognizing my hotel?
I recognize the curtains behind you. I know exactly what hotel you're in. You know, and to have that, to get sucked out of Montreal and go to America for a week and then come back, and I was alone in a hotel for 2 weeks, in an Airbnb for 2 weeks away from my family. I really got to appreciate the human connection that I've developed through my music and through the arts and all this. And we created some magic there, and I think it's going to come out in the next year, you know, whatever comes out. And I just want to, again, thank you for being an integral part of this new part of my life. And I look forward to building with you guys and growing
so much, Narcy.
even more.
Thank you for having me.